Hello all. Hope you had a productive week, and that you had a holiday, you and the family, and spend time together as a family, which is very, very important and part of the theme of today's thoughts and discussion. We are at the conclusion of the book of Genesis, which is very, very exciting, and we end with Parashat Vayechi. Vayechi, the portion of Vayechi, and the exact translation of Vayechi, or literal translation, is "and he lived," and Jacob lived. And I want to focus, why are we actually ending on this portion? What is so special about this portion that we decided to end the book of Genesis with? And to do that, to explore that a little, we need to zoom out and go back to the beginning and recognize that the book of Genesis is really handing us foundational elements. Without them, the world or history can't really begin. The story of history can't begin with, as far as Genesis is concerned. And one of the most central elements here is the assurance of the possibility of peace among human beings. And that's what Genesis is trying to tell us. And we could see, though, unfortunately, that peace is the mission of humanity, but we fail at it right from the start. If there would have been true peace between Adam and Eve, then they would have communicated properly. And if they communicated properly, the serpent would not have been able to tempt them. And of course, this failure of communication brings us the early death of man. We move one generation down, and we are dealing with Cain and Abel. And here, too, is another mission of failed brotherhood. And while we could see that communication is rebooting again, we're attempting to communicate again, as we say that, and Cain said to Abel in Genesis 4:8. So we see that they want to try to create a brotherhood bond, but this communication ultimately ends in violence and the death of his brother. Then we have Lamech, who also tries to engage and speak to his wives. But here too, we hear like an implicit threat in his words when he's talking about slaying the man that wounded him and the young man that's hurting him, and he even takes pride in it, according to some interpretations. So here too, this is ultimately just another step in the deterioration of humanity with regards to seeking peace. Of course, the generation of the flood, where the violence hits an extreme, what's called in Hebrew Hamas, no political association, just that's what the name is. And the world is filled with Hamas, and obviously, here too is a devastating point in our history. The generation of the Tower of Babel is attempted to solve this issue of dialogue between different people, but they decide to try to solve this by imposing a single language, and this contradicts the multifaceted nature of humanity. And lastly, we see that the mission of brotherhood is imposed ultimately on Abraham's family. And here too, we see Abraham is separated from Lot, his brother-in-law, to avoid conflict, his nephew, sorry, to avoid conflict. And here too, we don't achieve proper brotherhood. Isaac and Ishmael are living side by side, but there's no real dialogue between them. And Ishmael also eventually gets cast out of the family. Jacob and Esau, they almost recreate what happened with Cain and Abel. Fortunately, the parents' intervention prevents this, and we even get to a point where they maintain brotherhood for a very brief time when they see each other, and he sees God's face in Esau. But then that ends with them separating and each going their own path. And then we get to the sons of Jacob, which in a certain sense, they represent the peak of realization of brotherhood. Initially, we know that they hated him. As it says in Genesis 37:4, they hated him so that they could not speak a peaceful word to him. However, in this very condemnation that we see over here, we also hear some praise, as Rashi teaches us that they did not speak one thing on their mouth and another thing on their heart, as in they were very blunt about the fact that they did not like it. They were honest, and this honesty is what allows for a proper clarification between them, ending in peace. Right? They decided to engage in the brave space. Uh, but even at that point, when there's seemingly a reconciliation, there's still a question if this bond between the brothers, the sons of Jacob, is this because they want to avoid distressing their father and they're waiting till their father dies, so they could continue their internal strife? Or when Jacob passes away, do we see that this is actually a real testimony, a promise that even though it is a hard one and it is a difficult journey, it is still possible and essential for the progress of humanity that we seek out brotherhood and living together in peace. And this is why we conclude with this kind of promise. We conclude the book of Genesis with the promise, which allows us to actually begin the story of history. Uh, as I've been ending a lot of these, we are still very much in the seventh day, October 7th, in a certain sense, emotionally in Israel. Um, but while we've managed to reclaim our internal brotherhood of the nation of Israel, uh, obviously out there in the world, both with our immediate neighbors, but whether it be Ukraine and Russia or other countries, we must, as a society, we must, as a race, recognize what the Bible tells us and how we must seek for brotherhood and seek for peace is the only path forward. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and restful weekend.